I'm really excited about this conversation. Lately, I've been scouring Instagram looking for content that deals specifically with the path and the journey that I have been on. I don't believe any coincidence that I came across my guest content today. He's someone who I believe I got connected to because I actually follow his really good friend on Instagram as well. And so for those of you who don't know my guest today, I want to introduce you to Todd Jarrett. And so, Todd, I want to thank you for just agreeing to have the conversation and speaking with me.
Yeah, my pleasure, my man. It's exciting. I haven't run a podcast in a little while, so I'm pumped to jump in.
You haven't done a podcast in a while, and I am what some would call a novice or a rookie in doing podcasts. So we can learn and grow and evolve right now in the course of this conversation. So I am definitely appreciative of it. Todd, your Instagram says that you seek to help people heal their past and patterns quickly and managing their emotions. But before I get into that, before I delve into the importance of both of those categories, I'd like to ask about you. I'd like to ask about your own journey and how you reached the point where you are actually looking to and actually helping people heal their past and patterns and actually manage their emotions.
Yeah, my man. Beautiful question. And for me, originally a country kid. I'm from the outback of Australia. So I grew up in a really small town. We had about 2,000 people. And the short version of the long, kind of like the cliff notes, the main points that got me to where I am today. When I was in primary school, I was labeled as gifted, so really intelligent. And I went through and skipped years and then went through really intense bullying because I no longer fit in. I was the kid that was different because I went from one year to a different year group and they were like, you don't belong with us. So it was a big issue for me with belonging and fitting in. And then when I went to boarding school, I was a motocross racer and I started developing an interest in high performance, both in like the mindset and sport. And that then through the next few years of high school leading into university, I started training athletes and going more into like mindset. So that led me to studying sports science at university. And I got headhunted basically to come straight out of my uni degree in sports science to then move from Victoria, which is like down the south of Australia, to Queensland in the north of Australia to lecture at the university up there. So I was 21 when I started, 22, just to turn 22 when I started lecturing at the university on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. And my whole upbringing was science. I was a real fan of biology and sports science and understanding the body. And I was raised actually in a really strong Christian family. But as I got more into the science and there was the questioning and the doubting, the scientific mind for me, it pulled me to a different, the other side, so to speak. And um, the next couple of years was I was training athletes, lecturing at the university on the Sunshine Coast, and running actually a mentorship for allied health professionals. So I would upskill allied health professionals in what I learned through my internships and my personal study outside of uni and courses. And it got to a point where basically through my work ethic, just like obsession, that my body started to get run down and was getting sick. And I was then in and out of hospital the next few years with an autoimmune condition known as ulcerative colitis, which is basically where your immune system attacks your large intestines. So through that progressively getting more intense and more severe, I actually had to stop lecturing at the uni. I had to shut my business down. I had to stop training the athletes because I didn't have the capacity. I was getting so unwell to the point where I couldn't really get out of bed. I couldn't go into work. And I was going into malnutrition. My body was shutting down basically. And through this whole journey, through school, high performer, ducks of primary school and high school and a university, which I think in America might be valedictorian, like the highest marks. I'm not sure of
Yes.
the translation across. So very much the intellectual and intelligent, analytical, always wanting to understand patterns. That when I was really sick in hospital in 2019, at one point the surgeons walked in and the head surgeon said, "Look, you have 24 to 48 hours to live if things don't go well." And I was 24 at the time. and my mum was on speakerphone listening and I had a family friend with me because all of my family still lived down in Victoria and I was living, you know, 1,500 kilometers, which I think is around 1,000 miles away. And when he said those words, that's when a fundamental shift for me occurred. I was laying in the hospital bed in contemplation of, okay, well, if I die in the next 24 to 48 hours, how did I live my life? You know, people go through meditative processes or guided processes where it's like, get to your deathbed and like, did you live your life to your fullest? It's like, I got the real firsthand experience of that when I was 24. And that's been the true north of my life since. When that happened, I realized I hadn't made time for my family or my friends. I hadn't enjoyed myself. I'd been so attached to achieving my goals, realizing it was from a place of lack and not feeling enough. I was always trying to fill that hole and fill that void, that when I did get to the deathbed the first time, there was that realization of it felt like quite an empty life, a successful but empty life. I wasn't fulfilled. And that was the first real shift for me. That then led me to sitting a lot in meditation. I then went and sat in these meditation courses where you sit and meditate for 10 hours a day for 10 days straight. You don't exercise, you don't read, you don't write, you don't journal, you don't exercise. You're basically living like a monk. And that was kind of like my pull to, for me, again, trying to find something that was going to help me heal, because at this point the medical system wasn't really cutting the mustard, as we'd say. It wasn't really getting the job done. And I just got getting put on heavier and heavier medication. And by the end, about 6 months later, so early 2020, I was on a chemotherapy and leukemia level medication, variants of it. And my body was shutting down, getting worse. And eventually the surgeons called and said, look, we're sorry to inform you, but you're a non-responder. Non-responder basically means your body, your immune system isn't responding to the medication. And for someone that had been in and out of the hospital for the last couple of years, and I had such a fear what my life will be if I don't have the doctors and the surgeons, that was terrifying. It felt like I'd kind of been chained to a ship, and that ship started sinking. I couldn't get off. My only way for my health to be healed, my body to be healed, was through the medication. And I'd started at this point, probably over the last 6 months, reading Dr. Joe Dispenza's work and Dr. Bruce Lipton's work and understanding epigenetics. And again, the science mind for me was just reading everything I could to understand the body more. And I started to, I guess, also through the meditation, having more what we might call like spiritual experiences, start to realize that I feel like there's something greater here. There's something beyond what the medical system can tell me here or show me here. And it came a point in the end of March of 2020, and I made the decision to go cold turkey, cut all of the medication, the treatments that I was on. And in the next couple of weeks, what actually happened was my body got a lot worse. My liver and my kidneys actually went into shutdown, into failure. My body turned yellow. There's a whole lot more to the context of the significance, but basically for those 6 to 12 months, I was passing blood through, rectally, anywhere
Mhm.
between 10 to 20 times a day. I couldn't absorb nutrients. I was getting skinnier and skinnier and low energy and looking really sick. And there was a point in those couple of weeks after when I stopped the medication where I thought I was going to die. And the first time around, when the doctors and the surgeons said to me I had 24 to 48 hours to live, I look back and they would have been able to save me through surgery in my perspective. So I wasn't looking back. I don't feel like I was at risk of dying then. There was definitely words that brought that feeling up, but this second time around was a real, I don't know if I'm going to wake up in the morning. And I was experiencing that for a couple of weeks straight. Each night I'd go to bed and I just wouldn't know. So I'd be writing letters to my family about the things I love about them and things that I would love for them to continue in their life if I'm not here. So there was a real experience for me of the contemplation of life and death and the beauty of life and how blessed we are to get to experience this. And in the very same moment and same experience, I was in so much pain and in agony, and my body was shutting down more and more that I really didn't want to keep living that way. I didn't want to, not in a depressed way, but I didn't want to be alive for what I was experiencing. Like I was in the fetal position in agonizing pain pretty much every moment that I was awake. So sleep for me was like relief. And I didn't get to sleep a whole lot because I was constantly up through the night, needing to use the bathroom, bleeding. And there was a point almost to the day 2 weeks after I stopped the medication, and the body was, like I said, the body was close to its worst. And I remember I was laying in my bed, and there was just this sense of when I stopped the medication, it was almost like a prayer of like, God, if I'm supposed to make it through this, if I'm supposed to live through this, like I know I will. And it was that sense of either I'm gonna live and heal, or I'm gonna die at home. I'm not going back to the hospital because of the amount of fear I'd experienced. And those next couple of weeks were really testing, and I was hoping my body would just miraculously get better. And that didn't happen. And those 2 weeks later, I was laying in my bed, and I just remember praying. I was like, God, if I'm supposed to make it through this, I need a sign. Like I need to know, because this is terrifying. And the next day, a man reached out to me. We'd spoken about 6 months prior when I was in hospital, and I wasn't ready to work with him on the alternative medical approach, what I call now the decentralized medicine, or decentralized health approach. And he sent me a message and said, "Hey, I have a feeling we need to talk. We need to chat." And I was like, "Phew," a goosebump moment, like prayer answered. And we
Mm,
got on a call, and I explained what was going on. And at this point, I was already in the care of my dad. My dad had come to Queensland to look after me because I couldn't shower, I couldn't brush my teeth, I couldn't really move. So he was basically my carer. And when I got on that call with Mitch and went through everything, he's like, "Hey, we needed to start a while ago." And the next 8 to 10 months was a deep healing journey. It started very much physical through holotropic style breath work and supplements and nutraceuticals, but then it became more about somatic based healing, being with the
mhm,
sensations in the body. It became more about connecting to the energy within the body and noticing where the energy was getting blocked and attuning to that. And then connecting in with inner child work and timeline therapy work and parts work. And so I was getting a crash course in deep physical, mental, and emotional healing, but also through that, there was like spiritual experiences taking place as well. Through that period of time, having been the university lecturer and the performance coach for athletes, and running a mentorship and a business, and having a relationship and having the home, I lost all of that when I was really unwell. All of the business stuff. I ended my relationship. I was in the care of my parents. So I was no longer living in Queensland. And when I was down in Victoria in the care of my parents, this is right in the peak of COVID. I kept coming back to this question of like, if my whole life has flipped, if everything in my life seems to be upside down or reversed, and I haven't changed consciously my actions, my behaviors, my beliefs, or my values, which at this point in my life, they were the main things I'd worked with through personal development, through psychology, working with actions, behaviors, beliefs, and values. I kept coming back to this question of like, who am I now? Who am I going to be? If I get a second chance at life through this journey, who am I going to be? And I started to realize through my own experience, and then also through doing a lot of reading at this point in time, all I could really do was sleep, contemplate, and read. So there was a lot of time for deep introspection, that I started to recognize that identity was the fundamental like root of our human psychology. The first thought we have as humans is the I thought. And that's, that the ego being the construct of the mind, that, and then everything is related to the I. So the values that we have, the beliefs, the behaviors, the actions all come from that identity. And so I just set about creating a system to, again, a systems guy, performance guy. If I've got a second chance at life now and I get to live, how am I going to live my life? Who am I going to be? And so I just set about creating what's now known as the identity system, a set of tools I pieced together to enable me to create the life that I wanted to live from basically death's door, from ground zero, and rebuild my life. And people started to see my physical healing. I was getting healthier. People started seeing how I was showing up just with positivity and gratitude for the journey. And then people just through organic processes started to come to me. I'm like, hey, I want what you've got. I want to, whatever you're doing with this identity stuff, I want to work on that. And so I had professional athletes and paraplegics and business owners and all different forms of people coming to me while I was still quite unwell. And that gradually progressed. And for the next half decade, my focus was really on identity and helping people get clear on who they want to become. Because when we're clear on who we are, then the values that we have, the beliefs we uphold, the behaviors and the action will be in alignment with who we perceive ourselves to be. And that kind of led slowly to purpose work. So helping people uncover their soul's purpose, their spirit's purpose, and aligning them with that. And then it started to move toward gradually, just naturally self sabotage through understanding the nervous system and going, okay, these people are clear on who they want to be, but there's aspects that keep kind of falling short of who they want to be or how they want to show up. So then I started working more on that and creating a process to overcome self sabotage. And through that whole journey, there then started to be more work around emotions and the internal healing. I'd done a lot of that myself through my healing journey over those 5 or 6 years, but then it started to become supporting others, holding that
Mm.
space more into parts work, somatic work, the inner child work, and a lot of internal resourcing so that people not only get clear on who they are, but they have the tools to be able to be and embody that day in and day out. So yeah, it's my life's purpose. I know that's what I'm on earth for, and I know I have deep gratitude for the journey that's been. I look at the life that I've experienced so far, and I've been through some other challenging things in that period of time, and it's kind of like I've had a tough run, but it's in this sense of gratitude because those challenges have made me so resilient, so resourced, so passionate and convicted in my work to help and serve others that I heard a quote. The last thing I'll say on the context of the story was I heard a quote I'm going to say about 18 months ago, and I believe it was from a podcast actually. And this man was speaking about his challenges through his life's journey. And the host said, are you grateful for your challenges? And he said, absolutely. They've made me the man I am today. And he said, would you want to go back and experience them again? It's like, heck no, not a chance. No way. That was terrifying. So there's a sense of like, there's, the two truths at once. It's made me who I am, but would I want to go and experience that again? No way. So it's the frame of, I guess the context or the story that's led to where I am now.
I think that's one of the dilemmas that we face is how we hold space for being grateful for what we've been through but also possessing an unwillingness to not have to go through it again.
Mm,
Almost as if we've paid our dues, we've endured our trials, we've endured our trauma, we've endured our troubles. They've helped make us into the man or the woman that we are today. But if we're being honest with ourselves, I think two things are probably true. Number one, we don't want to experience them ourselves again. But number two, I've heard it said, I wouldn't wish this upon my worst enemy. And so there's a part where we wouldn't wish it upon our worst enemies. And so we have to hold space for both of those in our mind and in our thoughts where we recognize that we are the sum total. We are the product of the experiences that we've been through. However good, bad, indifferent they are, they have helped make us who we are. Two things that you mentioned in everything that you described. You mentioned the inner child and you also mentioned identity. And one of the individuals that I follow on Instagram is a good friend of yours, Ryan Moresby White. And I first got introduced to him on the Sacred Thomas podcast. And he focuses a lot on inner child. He focuses a lot on needing to heal the inner child. And for yourself, you mentioned that you were gifted, but you were bullied. And
mm.
so the question that I have is there a connection between not even just the inner child? I'm convinced that there are a lot of people that they were frozen in time, so to speak. They experienced something in their childhood that froze them. I'm convinced it's almost like an autosave feature on a Word document or on a Google document or on a Pages document where we experience these things in our lives and we are familiar with fight or flight, but there's another word that I know and that's freeze. And I think there's a lot of people that they themselves have been frozen in time, frozen in their experiences. Their emotions were shattered, their thoughts were shattered, patterns were constructed, behaviors were constructed, attitudes were constructed. And so I say all that to ask the question of, is there a connection between our inner child and identity? Because, and let me frame it a little bit clearer with this. I'm convinced that who we are, as you mentioned, that I statement, who we are is first shaped by what we experience as a child. So if you're speaking into the camera right now and you're talking to somebody, what's the connection between the inner child and our identity? And how important is it for us to truly understand who we are? And to your point, what our purpose is and what our core values actually are.
Oof, we've got some layers to dig through. I love this. So the first thing that I'll mention is when you spoke about like the autosave from the inner child experience or freeze, we actually have, from the understanding of the nervous system, now we have fight, flight, freeze, we have fawn and fit in. So the fit in is more of a ventral vagal or social nervous system response, but the fawning is another response as well, where it's like kind of like we drop our boundaries and there's a fitting in, doing what we need to do to stay safe, playing dead kind of thing, which is dropping the boundaries. And so the freeze is the one that where you mention, but basically the way I explain it, if we go from the inner child aspect, is when we are a child and something happens where it causes excess stress. So basically what we would, trauma is what they say is something that happens too fast, too soon, too much, or basically an inappropriate dose for our nervous system. We can't handle it. Another way you could say it is in like some people, you didn't receive enough support. So it meant the stress that you had to face alone was too much. And so basically any traumatic event is when we have an inappropriate dose of stress for our system. And what happens in that moment, whether it's bullying from someone, whether it's an experience with our parents, whether it's a more traumatic event, is our nervous system does what it's designed to do. And it almost like it takes a screenshot of the experience. Okay, there's this many people, or they're this gender, or we're in this situation. And it basically puts a little red flag in our nervous system. And that little red flag, the way I explain it to people is, imagine if anyone has seen Bruce Almighty and he goes to pull out the filing cabinet and the filing cabinet like flies across the room. It's just like this never ending drawer. That's kind of like our nervous system. And our nervous system stores files or experiences. That's why it's easier for you to remember experiences that have been highly emotional and to recall them than the exam that you studied for 3 months for when you were back in high school or university, because it didn't have emotional connection. So our nervous system will flag what it needs to go, okay, this will either give us pleasure, do more of that, or this will give us pain, avoid that. And so the aspect of the inner child where you're talking about like the freeze response, it could actually be a fight, a flight, a freeze, a fawn, or a fit in response based on the situation. And that little red flag is like a reaction signal. So if I'm in an example might be if a woman has been abused by 3 men, particular 3 men. She might be walking down the street and she's completely fine. She sees 1 man over here and there's 2 men over here. She's completely normal. Then as she's walking, she turns around a corner and on the other side of the street, there's 3 men standing together. And as soon as she sees 3 men, the nervous system goes, no, red flag. Remember what happened last time? 3 men turned, go the other direction. It's a protection response. And so it remembers this, it remembers the context of the situation and the situation itself to act as a protection. And so I use that example like the red flag. The red flag is planted as a file. So if something comes up, it's very easy to find the file and have the same response, which is why then men might be having a conversation with their partner and they're being really present, grounded, attentive, they're validating her experience. And then she does one thing that brings up the mannerism, just like his mum. And in that moment, he goes, geez, she's just like my mum. And then bang, all of a sudden he's got no capacity. He's like, I need to get out of here. He's like, oh, whatever, and just wants to leave. Because what happened in that moment was the red flag from when he was a little boy with mum, which was like, oh, I can never do anything right. So always, no, I used to run off. I don't want to listen to you, mum. Leave me alone. Run to his room. So what happens is when that specific flag is touched on, when that experience triggers that, that's when we go back from man consciousness to boy consciousness. And this is why this form of work is so powerful, because when we relate it to the sense of identity or values, beliefs, behaviors, and actions, when that consciousness, or you might call it the energy that's stored around, let's say it's 7-year-old Todd or 7-year-old Steve, and we've just had that situation where we're talking with our partner, then we have the realization this is like mum, and it triggers us back to that experience when we were 7 with mum. We then revert into the identity of that little boy. I'm not enough. I'm always in trouble. I'm the bad boy. I'm this, I'm that. The energy, the charge, kind of like the file reads how we perceived ourselves to be at that time, who we were, how we lived our life, what this all meant, our relationship with our primary caregivers or the family around us, and we go into that response, which is why we might have the trigger reaction, and then we have that. You'll have ever had like the emotional hangover or that residual that comes afterwards. It's like
Yeah.
it takes you a while to kind of come back. That's because the file has all of that information kind of wrapped up in it. And that's why we can feel like after that experience, feel that really intense sense of shame or that sense of, oh, I don't want to talk to you about this. And it can hang around for a little while, it might even hang around for days or weeks, because what's happened is that flag has been raised. And now that it's been raised, it's like kind of like popping up a little bit higher than the other files, just being, hey, make sure that we're safe. Make sure that doesn't happen again. So we're quicker to then react. And that's where the reaction cycles in relationships then take place, because once it's triggered once, it's easier to be tapped on again. So that's the link there in the sense of the nervous system and the inner child and how that can link into identity. The key piece here when it really comes to who we want to be as men is that the work that I do for identity is primarily around who we want to be as a man now. And we don't necessarily choose the aspects of the little boy that we need to go and do healing with. We get really clear on, okay, who do I want to become? What do I want to step forward and into? And once we're clear on that, so let's say it's for me, like I'm a resolute warrior. That's a key piece of my identity. Resolute means it's already done. If I have an outcome I want to achieve, it's already done. The warrior means I'm resilient. I will get there. So it's something that like enables me to march forward when things are challenging. And so if I want to become a resolute warrior, that's who I'm stepping into as a man. Once we're clear on who we want to be, then what we're able to do is reflect back and go, okay, what are the parts of me or the experiences that oppose that? What would sabotage me being a resolute warrior? And then we're able to look at the reactions of, say, the little boy. And it might be that, hey, when I don't understand what's going on in my business, I get super overwhelmed and I just want to avoid it. So I don't look at my emails for 2 days, or I don't answer my messages, or I ghost people, or I don't deal with the thing that needs to be dealt with. Okay. When we then go back and connect with the inner child or the little boy, and we're able to go back to the original pain, basically the root cause experience that led to that behavior. Again, the first red flag. We always, when we can, ideally go back to the first red flag. Because what happens is when we go to the first experience, that original pain or that original wound, and we're able to create safety for that little boy, basically do a redo of that experience where instead of it being a failure, too much stress, we get through it successfully. It rewires the neural pathways related to that. We call like dissolves or metabolizes the charge that's in the nervous system, and basically that red flag burns away. What then also happens is if it's the first red flag, it's like a domino effect. And all of the triggers related to the original event that have happened through the years, they get impacted as well. The charge around them dissolves. So that's where, say, with identity, we get clear on who we want to become. And then we're able to go back, okay, what are the things that would hold us back from that? What are the things that cause our nervous system to go into a stress response, which then means we don't have the capacity and we're in the consciousness of a little boy that will then self-sabotage who we want to become.
There's so much to unpack there. And one of the questions that I guess I have, and I'm going to sort of frame this question is, I guess the question is two parts. Number one, how do we recognize when when the part of us that's emerging or the part of us that is presenting itself to the surrounding world is the grown version of ourselves versus the childhood version of ourselves. I was listening to a podcast from Mel Robbins, and one of the things that she said is life would take on a completely different perspective, and we would begin to treat people differently if we realized that we were all children in adult bodies. If we started recognizing the children that are in the people that are around us. If I started looking at my wife and at certain times when I recognize it's the little girl inside of her versus the adult woman that's standing, and or vice versa, when it's the little boy inside of me that she's interacting with versus the adult man that's standing in front of her. Gabor Mate, in his podcast with Lewis Howes, said trauma is not necessarily what happens to us, but what happens in us.
Yeah.
Or what happens through us.
Yeah.
And in his book, The Myth of Normal, he actually says that when we view trauma, whether it's big T trauma or little t trauma, when we view it solely as something that is rooted in an event or in a situation or of circumstance. It has the ability, we can't change that. It is a fixed point in time. It is a fixed event. No matter how much we want to go back in time and change those events, they cannot be changed. I cannot change my dad passing away during the pandemic. I cannot change standing by his deathbed and watching him breathe his last breath. But what I can recognize and what I do understand is that that was a traumatic event in my life. But what I do understand is that that was a trauma that was produced inside of me. And if I can recognize that trauma is more about what happens inside of me than it is the actual event itself, then I can begin to heal. I can begin to grow. I can begin to mature. And to your point about those red flags, and I would even dare say triggers, because triggers is another big thing, especially when we're talking about trauma. When we're talking about trauma, we're going to talk about triggers because more often than not, you'll experience a trigger. The trigger reactivates in your brain the event that you happened or those things that took place in your life. And now you're not only replaying them, but now it's almost like you have to heal again and again and again. And so I appreciate what you said about the dissolving of those red flags, the dissolving of the constructs that are around them, the dissolution or the dissolving of the triggers. I say all that to say, number one, how do we recognize when it's the little boy or the little girl that's inside of us that's actually interacting with the world? Number one. But the second question is, how do we go about healing that child? Because I don't know if you would agree with this, but I almost wonder if there are different versions of that child based on how much actually happened when you were a child. There may be the 7-year-old Todd, there may be the 9-year-old Todd, there may be the 13-year-old Todd, and you have to almost individually, one by one, heal each version of yourself in the past so that in the present you can be a healed and whole version.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. And the way that I would answer this is that it's actually right here on my shirt. I know those on the audio won't see it, but it's two hands, a right hand, uh, basically holding the left hand like it's a newborn baby. This is what we call a resourcing hold. And the way that I and the way that my clients are able to discern whether it's the conscious man or the unconscious boy that's leading or responding or reacting in any moment is being able to connect in with an anchor that we know anchors and connects us to our man energy and our awareness. And then from there, being able to see does this feel like me or does that feel like I'm observing another part of me? So what might happen is something I get triggered and I notice, oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable right now. So first thing is like the sensations. Okay, I notice maybe my heart's racing or my chest is tight. Maybe my throat's clamping up or I'm sweating. There might be nerves there. Usually anything that's uncomfortable is a sign of, that in interaction, there's a sign of some form of trigger. And the little boy in us is trying to communicate through the sensations in our body. So the first thing is when I notice that, what I would do is I would take a deep breath to bring my awareness to the moment, sigh it out. And then what we do is we get them to connect into a place in their body where they feel safe and grounded. So that might be their stomach, it might be their heart, it might be their quads. For me, it's like my quads. I feel strong and solid in my quads. I know I can squat some decent weight, so I feel really solid there. And what I'll do is once I've felt into that groundedness and I can feel that safety, which is a sign of, okay, there's regulation, the man is online here, I'll then bring my right hand to hold my left hand. The right hand symbolizes and is connected to the man energy. So right hand being our masculine side, like the pillar, the steadiness, the present awareness of a man. That's anchored to the safety I've just connected in with my body. And then what I do is when I hold the left hand being our feminine, the more feeling or emotional part of us, which is more like the little emotional or reactive little boy, it's kind of like the man is here holding the boy. And so then what happens is there's an awareness that I, the man, is here and there could be the boy here. And I'll literally internally or out loud go, hey, I'm here. What's going on? Kind of like it's like an inner child process for the men that have done that before. And what will typically happen very quickly, the more you practice it, the easier and the quicker it gets. As I go into the resourcing hold, I'll just have my hands there together and I can be going through internally, hey, I'm here, what's going on? And the little boy might go, hey, I'm nervous because we're on camera and we don't want to say the wrong thing. It's like, okay,
Right.
got you. And then what happens is we, as the man, get to be the parent or the resourced safety that that little boy never got. And that's why there's a trigger here. Because at some point when I was younger, I was speaking and eyes were on me and I was nervous and I didn't get the nurturing or the support or the resourcing I needed. And that's why there's still a red flag. And so that red flag pops up and that's why I might be nervous on camera. And then when I'm able to notice that, and you wouldn't have seen it before, but when we were first on the call, I had my hands in the resourcing hole just to like let the little boy, hey, you're safe. I'm here. I've got you. And what will then
Yeah.
happen is when I hear that little boy and he goes, yeah, I'm nervous because of this. It's like, okay, what do you need right now? And he might go, I just need to know that no matter what we say, we're not going to mess it up because it's us being authentic. It's like, okay, got you. Is there anything else you need? I just need to know that we're enough exactly as we are. Okay, is there anything else? No, I feel good now. And all of a sudden, the tension, the nervousness, the heaviness, the stress, it's gone. And there's just like the feeling that's here for me now. It's like that sense of joy. It's like, it'll be what it'll be and we'll be who we are. And that little boy feels safe because it's almost like he got dad or uncle or the role model to be like, hey, I'm here. I've got you. Like pat on the back, like, let's go. We've got this. You're a team. And so that resourcing hold is the reason that that's on. This is Ryan and we run our men's retreats together. That's one of the key things we anchor into the men is resourcing hold because so many men outsource their sensitivity or outsource their capacity to regulate to a woman, to alcohol, to drugs, to porn, to work. They don't actually know how to manage or resource themselves. And so this becomes their resource. When things are building up or there's stress or there's tension or there's a lot of emotion there, hey, what's going on? What do you need right now? And the little boy might go, hey, I need to go and just cry for a few minutes. Okay, cool. I've got you. And what happens is you start to develop a direct line of communication. It's like a phone call on speed dial between the little boy and you as the man. And that's where the real healing takes place, not in a one-off inner child guided meditation or not in a 3-month container where you're doing that. It's like the continual day-to-day connection, communication, and embodiment, because we know that there's always going to be something more that comes up. You know, if anyone's ever done a 3-month container and they're like, I'm done, I'm fixed, I'm complete, I want to study them because they are one in the human race. There's always going to be something that pops up. And when then we're able to learn to resource within ourselves, that's when we're able to be the man that we want to be. Because in that moment when the boy came up to take over, as you said before, like facing out to the world, and I noticed that when I'm able to check in and hold him, then in that moment, he trusts me, the man, to lead. And then the man is leading again. So it's basically, to answer the question in the summary form of it, bringing back to full completion, anytime we feel in our body, this is where somatic work is really important, we notice or we can label or identify, oh, I'm nervous, or I'm tense, or oh, I'm angry, or I'm frustrated, or oh, I'm triggered about this, or maybe there's sadness. Cool. If you're not feeling like just super solid and regulated or really centered, that's usually a sign that there's something to check in on there. And that's when we're able to be the integrated man, a consciously led man. And it's not to say that the boy doesn't come up, but when he does, he's heard and he's seen. And the final thing I'm going to say here, which is so important, is, as I alluded to and as I said earlier, the cause of stress or the cause of trauma, and you mentioned this with Gabor's work and his messaging, was that it's not what happens outside of us, it's what happens inside of us. And if we use public speaking, for an example, because most people are terrified of public speaking, the reason that they are is because as a child, they've gone to do it at some point and all eyes are on them, which is a lot of pressure to get it right. And so the body goes into protection mode. And that little child, the reason that became a traumatic experience was because they were alone, say, speaking to the people or to the group or to the audience at school, whatever it may have been. They don't have big bro by their side going like, you've got this, come on, we're sweet. You just be yourself, or mum or dad there with them. They're isolated and they don't have the tools to emotionally regulate as a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or however old that may be when that experience happens. When a child is given the resources, whether it's through themselves or another's nervous system, that's when trauma doesn't take place. There's an example of this when there was a group of school children that were in a cave excursion and the cave entrance collapsed. I think there was somewhere between like 10 to 30 children, and they studied them over a longitudinal study over many years. And there was one child that was like the torchbearer for the kids. It was like digging them out and save them. he was out of like the 30 children. He was the one that didn't have trauma that needed to be worked on from the event because he was
Wow.
resourced. He was the one going, okay, this is what we need to do. He didn't see it as like, he didn't have a freeze moment or that, oh, what do we do? It was like, okay, this is what we need to do. He was kind of like in that man mentality, whereas all the other kids were freaking out. When they studied them over the years, he was the guy that was like, that didn't have any negative impacts on him. If anything, it actually showed more resilience and power because he was resourced. And so this is where, as a child, we wanted mum or we wanted dad, and they weren't either emotionally available or they weren't present or they didn't understand, or maybe they shamed us, so they didn't meet those needs. And the beautiful thing about the work that I'm blessed to be able to do is it's about how to show people and connect people to self healing. Because as a child, most of our trauma, as I just said, took place because we didn't have the resources we needed from those that were around us to provide them. As we're older and you're getting to listen to this podcast and have these conversations, those listening, your inner child has access to you, the present man, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It just requires a little bit of practice. And then what happens is in every moment of every day, there is the man and there is the boy. And anytime the boy comes up, you're available and you know what the boy needs because you can hear him and you're willing to meet his needs. Okay, I can validate you. I can meet that need. I can go and sit down or take rest or whatever it is. In contrast to maybe dad that didn't understand emotions. So if anything, they're the healer we've always sought. We're the resource we've always sought. You know, so many different religious and spiritual books talk about like the healer within or that self within, the spirit within. It's like this is the truth of it from more of the healing space that we can resource within ourselves. And that's where, from my perspective, the biggest transformation in men takes place because it's not a dependency on a coach or a therapist or a book or a course. It's like, once I've learnt this, I've got this, you know, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. Like that's my way of doing this work is how can I teach man to self-resource?
You mentioned the integrated man, and I've heard that before. You also mentioned being resourced, and I appreciate both of those sentiments. I appreciate both of those realities. There's a gentleman that I follow on Instagram. His name is Jason Wilson. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he wrote a book called The Man the Moment Demands. And I reference that because a lot of times I look at my upbringing and I look at what my dad didn't teach me. I look at what my dad didn't provide for me. I look at how it's impacted and influenced me as an adult. I look at my parents' marriage and I don't see in it a blueprint for how I'm supposed to be married to my current wife. I don't see it as a model. Anything and everything that I learned about marriage, sexuality, relationships, I learned trial by fire. And it'd be very easy for me to blame my dad. It'd be very easy for me to make excuses. But one of the things that I'm realizing is that I have to evolve into becoming the man that I never had. That is the responsibility that is on me. That is the requirement. That is the assignment that is on me. One of the things that Gabor Mate actually said, I believe it was in the same podcast with Lewis Howes, is he mentioned an author, and I might butcher the author's name, but it's Bezel van der Kolk. Okay.
Yep. Done
And
well.
he wrote a book called The Body Keeps Score. And one of the biggest questions that I have, because in order to become the man the moment demands, in order to become the resolute man, in order to become the integrated man, in order to become the man that you and I are called to be, I'm convinced that there needs to be this healing that takes place. There needs to be emotional healing. There needs to be our mental health needs to become priority. Our spiritual growth, our spiritual maturity needs to take priority. And I'm understanding the connection between the mind and the body. I'm understanding the connection between emotions and the body. And with that being said, I say all that to preface this question. How do we know when our body is trying to release unprocessed trauma? In other words, I'm convinced that our bodies can store trauma. The trauma that we've experienced in childhood, in teenage years, in our young adult years, or even in our adult years, any trauma that we've experienced, it can be stored into our bodies. But with that being said, our bodies can actually look to release it because it becomes too much. The weight and the burden of the trauma, whether big T or little t, it becomes too much. And now the body, it goes into self protection mode and it goes into self preservation mode. And the body itself almost, instead of fight or flight, it just literally goes into fight and it will now fight for you. So, my question is, how do we know when our body is seeking to process unresolved trauma? Number one. And number two, how do we appropriate that and how do we actually walk in that within our lives to make sure that the process isn't stunted, but it actually is completed?
Beautiful. Hitting the questions nail on the head. Love it. The first aspect to this, the key piece, is a man needs to have connection to his body. Most men in modern civilization are so conditioned into their minds, into their heads, into the racing mind, the constant thoughts, they got to do this, the next thing, they got to achieve that, got to accumulate this. There's the hamster wheel going on internally. And we're so caught in our head, it's almost like the awareness of neck and down doesn't really exist for a lot of men. And I say that from having worked with hundreds and hundreds of men, is that the biggest journey is from a man's head to his heart, from a man's head to his body. But when a man is able to tune into his body, and I was only guiding my men's group on this exact thing yesterday, was getting them into their body for a process we were doing on identity, was that the key piece is that when they can move from their head into their body, that's when they can start to map the landscape. They can start to feel what baseline is. I explain people, I like to simplify everything. A big part of my personality back in the day was how smart can I sound because I'm gifted. And I used to over jargonize everything. And there's a big realization of how simple can I make things. So I love metaphors and I love story and an illustration. So the way I explain the nervous system is you've got your window of tolerance, like your capacity where you're in the integrated man. That's your green zone in the middle. Above that is a red zone. We know the red zone from driving a car, rev limiter. That's your fight or flight. That's your anxiety, your worry, your stress, your fear. And then on the other end, down the bottom is the blue. That's the freeze, the fawn, the fit in. That's you're feeling hopeless, feeling tired, feeling lethargic, feeling depressed, feeling stuck. So we have the green zone where we ideally want to operate. That's when we're primarily in the integrated man. And then almost always when we're in the little boy, we're in the red or the blue zone. So it's a really simple way I explain it to people. But how does a man know if he's in the red, the green, or the blue if he can't feel the sensations in his body, if he's so in here? Because so many men are so in their head that when we actually take them at the start of a process or the start of a session and they go to actually sit still, they're like, man, my heart's racing. It's like, yeah, that's because you're in the red. You don't know how to slow down. Your body doesn't know. So you haven't been able to actually find what green is. So one of the first things that I'll do with men, and to answer your question, is to slow them down in a process or in a journey to find their green zone. What does green zone feel like for you? So when I'm in the middle of my green, so to speak, and you might tune into the same, you might think of a time that you're on a holiday when you're super relaxed, really open, calm, maybe kind of joyful, just a time when you felt really at peace internally. And I know for me personally, this could also be using like a memory from childhood or earlier years where it was like your happy place, your safe place. And you feel into that and you're like, that's it there. And you're like, I could feel it just then. It's like my chest feels open. My heart feels expansive. I feel like a spaciousness through my body, through my limbs. It's like, rather than it being dense, it's like there's a lot of openness between my cells or between my bones. It feels like all of the tension in my muscles just relaxes. Like my joints have softened. Everything's just taking a breath and let it out. That's me in my green. So if I know that's my green and I'm able to map that, what then happens is if I'm going to get onto a podcast and I'm sitting there and I do a little track, I'm like, oh man, my heart's beating fast. Because I know that when I'm in my green, usually it's almost like I don't notice my heart. Super soft or super slow. If I hop on here and I notice it's beating hard or that it feels like it's going fast, boom, that tells me I'm somewhere up in the red. There's a little boy that's feeling something. Maybe it's that my throat's a little bit choked up. I feel like I keep swallowing. I'm nervous about speaking. Boom, that's not usual when I'm in the green, so that's another sign. I'm feeling super tired. and I'm getting overwhelmed by my tasks. Boom, that's not me in the green. So you start to have sensations that become your cue that, hey, we've got something going on here, check in. And so that's the first way. So the first part of the question there, in terms of the body keeping the score, it's literally your 24/7 mapper, your map and your tracker for what's needing to be sat with or checked in with, resourced, held. And the where that then leads to, of which is a part of the second part of the question, where it's like, how do we know when the body's trying to release trauma? Again, we can only really know from a felt sense when we can tune in with the body. But for men that are in their head a lot of the time and really busy and racing mind and go, 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 some really obvious signs that their body wants to feel things, but they're not ready to, is they'll sit and scroll when they finish work in the afternoon. And they'll sit in the car and they'll just scroll rather than go inside, because already they're overwhelmed. That's why they're needing space to dissociate before they go and deal with something else. It
Yeah.
could be general scrolling. You know, whenever they have a moment of quiet, like they go to the toilet at work or whatever, and instead of sitting on the toilet in silence, they're on their phone, not only because there's an addiction there, but because their body's uncomfortable with sitting in silence and stillness. It could be that when their workload is higher, they eat more sugary foods, which is a normal chemical thing. But again, if you look deeper into it, there's actually a part of you that's overwhelmed, and that's the comfort food. Again, it's pretty much any time we're trying to resource externally rather than internally. And that could be examples. Other examples of that is men have gone through a breakup and they're either listening to really sad music or really intense music. It's like one is trying to avoid the feeling, the other one's trying to bring the feeling, the sadness that's there. Or the other one's like, no, just fucking work hard and move on, forget about it. So it will give you subtle signals. It's not going to be as obvious as typically as you're sitting there and then tears just start rolling down your face. Your body's like, come on, feel me. Because usually that requires a level of safety for the little boy to know, hey, the man's here. I've got you. You can let this out. Because most of the time, you know, the way of dealing with the discomfort that's underneath the surface is to pack a lid right here, put a lid on it at the shoulders. It's like, cool, we don't go down and in there because that's uncomfortable. We just stay up in here thinking, no feeling. So that's where the aspect of when we ask the question around how do we know when the body's trying to release emotion or release trauma. When we're caught in the head, usually it's all of the things that distract us, all of the things that we can use to keep us busy. And most men are like, yeah, but that's my whole life. It's like, I love you, bro. And that's the calling, that there's stuff right here, right under the surface. Because if you sat still for half an hour, not even meditated, but you just sat, no TV, no phone, you'd start to notice, boom, 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 boom. You know, that, oh, you're wasting your time. You should be doing something else. You're falling behind. You're not enough. You know, you should be at the gym, or you should be studying, you should be working. It's like, whoa, all of those shoulds. Should is a shaming word. Should is you're not doing it and you should be, expectation and reality. And so it's like, if soon as that pops up, hey, there's a little boy in here right now that's hurting. He's trying to get your attention. So that's where, you know, the racing mind actually comes from. It's
Uh,
different versions of the little boy. We in internal family systems therapy, or simple words like parts work. There's parts of us and they're trying to communicate and they're waving their little red flag like, hear me, I'm stressing, I'm freaking out here, or I'm worried, or I don't feel enough, pay attention to me. So for anyone that might not understand parts work yet, just two examples. One, have you ever had an experience where one part of you wants to go to the gym and the other part of you wants to lay on the couch and watch a movie? Cool. Parts. Have you ever had an example or an experience where one part of you wants to sit fully present with your woman and hear her, and the other part of you just wants to walk away? Or maybe in the same moment, another part of you wants to yell at her. Those are parts. They're, as you mentioned earlier, Steve, when you spoke to, like, we might have a 7-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 5-year-old inner boy. They're the flag nervous system responses that are trying to get the man's attention, to be heard, to be held, to be resourced, so they can be integrated and thus become the integrated man.
There's a question that I have, and you mentioned happy place. You mentioned there's almost an antithesis. There is almost this other part of us that is diametrically opposed to the trauma that we've experienced in our lives. whether it's big T or little t trauma. We like to rehearse all of that. Our mind, we train our minds, we train our hearts, we train our emotions, we train our bodies to rehearse and replay trauma over and over and over and over again. And we not only rehearse it in our mind, but if you rehearse it long enough and loud enough in your mind, eventually it's going to manifest in your words, and you're going to continue to rehearse it verbally. So you're rehearsing it in your mind, you're rehearsing it in your soul, you're now regurgitating it verbally, and as a result it comes and it manifests in the body. Where I want to go with that and where I want to take that is there, I feel like there's this antithesis. I feel like there's this opposing force to that. Almost as, and I'm going to go pop culture with this, and you mentioned the happy place.
Mm.
And you mentioned rehearsing maybe those good memories, those good parts of your life. And pop culture has given me three references for this. So, first reference is going to be the movie Happy Gilmore, which is the quintessential, all-encompassing happy place where he's laying on the chair and you see the man on the tricycle, you see the man on the piano, and you see the woman coming out with the two jugs of
Mhm.
beer and everything. That is my understanding of
Yeah.
happy place. I think of Happy Gilmore. And in order to live in the moment, in order to show up in the moment and do what was required of him, he had to go to that happy place. Okay. That's the first reference. The second reference is also pop culture. It's interestingly enough the movie Harry Potter. And when Harry Potter wanted to cast a spell in order to protect him from an opposing force, it's called the Patronus charm.
Mm.
In order to conjure that charm, in order to bring about that protection for what he needed to go into that memory. He needed to find a place that was inside of himself that was strong enough and powerful enough to where he could actually now protect himself from everything that was going on around him. Okay. So that's reference number two. Reference number three, and my wife and I just finished all 5 seasons of it, but Stranger Things. Okay. So in the show Stranger Things on Netflix, in order for Elle to somehow operate in what she needed to do, she needed to find this positive memory. She needed to find this positive reinforcement. She needed to find these good moments in her life in order to actually show up. And so I think that that is incredibly important because I don't think that that gets enough traction. I don't think that gets enough attention. We want to be the person that the moment demands. We want to be the husband that we need to be. We want to be the wife that we need to be. We want to be the mother or the father. We want to be the man or the woman that the moment demands. And I was having a conversation with someone the other day and he said sometimes the moment that's in front of us is bigger than our spouse. It's bigger than our children. It's bigger than our neighbor. It's bigger than our friends, and it requires more of us. And I really want to build on that. I really want to build on how important it is to rehearse not those things that broke us. Ray Seifa, I follow him on Instagram. Ray Seifa, he did a quote and he says, God will put you back together again in front of the people that broke you. And I love it. I love that quote because there is so much emphasis placed on all of what we've gone through, not enough emphasis on those things that actually are core memories of what we actually need in our lives. And so I want to highlight that. We don't necessarily need to have an in-depth conversation about that because I want to shift the conversation a different way. But I really want to highlight that because I think there's something to be said about that. When I can rehearse and I can replace, right? Overcoming addiction is not just removing that which enslaved you. Overcoming addiction is also replacing what once bound you, what once held you captive, what once oppressed you. And now all of a sudden we can replace shame and guilt. We can replace it with joy and with peace and with rest. And it's no longer based on external variables. It's no longer based on external circumstances. It's no longer based on what happened to us, what did or didn't happen to us in our lives, what we did or didn't have. Now, all of a sudden, we have this framework
Mm.
where we can become an integrated man or an integrated woman, and we can actually live in a holistic environment. And so here's my question, okay? Completely unrelated. And as you're talking, I think about my own life. And you spoke about safety.
Mm,
I'm convinced that in order for me to provide safety for anyone else, I have to first provide safety for myself. I have to be a safe place for myself. I have to give myself to self care. I have to give myself to self love. But here's my question. My question is, how does a man provide safety for a woman? Number one,
mhm.
girlfriend, fiance, wife. How does a man provide safety for a woman? Conversely, how does a woman provide safety to a man? Because at the end of the day, one is not more important than the other. At the end of the day, both partners, both parties need to feel safe. So, how do we go about creating that safety?
Yeah, beautiful question. We have a really simple framework for this. It's called me, you, we. And the essence of me, you, we is usually I would draw it up. The way I would explain it is we have the me, we have the I. And imagine that I write the word me, and there's just that. And then I draw a circle around it to kind of hold like there's the me wrapped in a circle. And that signifies the regulation. That signifies holding themselves. That signifies being resourced. I've got me. When that takes place, when I am solid, what then happens is I'm resourced, I'm regulated, I'm in the green zone, which means I'm not in a survival response. The green is where we're like ventral vagal, that's like our social connection when we're feeling good. The red or the blue that we spoke about before, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or fit in, that's a stress survival response. Survival response is resources are here. What do I need right now? What can you give me? I need to be looked after here. I need you to look after me. I'm what matters. I've got the problems. So all of the energy comes in here if we're not regulated, if we're in a stress response. So if you, as in like there's the you being the partner, so there's me here, and there's you over here, and I'm not regulated, so there's no circle around me basically for containment. And my partner goes to bring me stuff, and I'm in a survival response. I'm in the red or the blue, which means I matter here. I'm stressed. I've got issues. I need to survive. She goes to bring me something. That's when I'll get triggered or I'll react or I'll want to walk around. I'll want to yell because it's about how do I make myself feel better right now? Because I'm already uncomfortable and you're making it worse. So there's the principle of me is when I become regulated and I'm solid, I can now point my energy. I'm good. I'm safe. I can now point my attention and my awareness to you. And when that happens, now there's the we, because I've got me and I'm attuned to you. I can feel you're here. This is what you're going through. Now there becomes a moment where there becomes the connection here of we. And that we might look like two very different things. One might be your partner's just breaking down and you're purely with her in that moment, holding her, creating safety, creating stillness, steadiness for her nervous system to know she can open more, release more, process more, heal more. The other way I can look is she too is regulated and I'm regulated as well. And now we're in an interaction of she's feeling into me, I'm feeling into her, and we're in a dance. There's a dance that happens when two nervous systems are both regulated, resourced, and feeling safe because the energy can go to each other. In that example just before that I gave, where I spoke of, say, if my partner's in a really emotional experience, she's dysregulated. It's like all of the energy is going to her. I'm creating safety for her. And she's like, I need to process this to get through this. So there's not as much of a dance in the we, but there is a safety provided. So we use the framework of me, you, we, and that links into both how we create safety for a man to a woman and a woman to a man. First thing. And this is why a lot of my content, and I know Ryan's is the same, it's like we speak a lot about relationships, but the core of our work is me first. We do
Yeah.
plenty of work on me before we even consider looking at the you or the we. Because if there's so many people that are in relationship that are like, we should be working on these things together or they should be doing that. It's like, bro, you don't even know where your green zone is. Until we've got that, you're like running blind in your relationship because you don't actually know when you're triggered or when you're not, when you're regulated and you can hold her or not. So that's where in relationship, there's a lot of projection and blame where it's like we need to take more responsibility first of self, of the me, create that regulation, and then we can become attuned to someone else. We can't be attuned to someone else when we're not already regulated ourselves. So that's the first thing. The ways I would respond to creating safety, the primary thing that women want is a sense of, and you could ask many women that have very wealthy husbands or partners that they've been with for a long enough period of time. It's like they get bored of the money and the material. After what they want is depth. They want emotional connection and want emotional vulnerability. Women want to feel a man because women are feeling creatures. And a lot of women don't feel safe with men, not because they don't provide financially or they don't provide with material items around the house, but because they can't feel them. So they don't want to open their own heart because they haven't felt the other man, the man's heart to hold that. So there's not a trust there. And that's so common. This is a massive thing. I also run women's retreats with a female business partner. So I'm the male role in a room of 25 women at a time for 4 days. It's intensive. And the primary thing that comes out of it is that women want a man to meet them in the depths, in the emotion. So they
Yeah.
want the way a man creates safety for a woman is one through steadiness of character so that it's repeatable, consistent, reliable, because that then creates predictability, which is what a woman's nervous system needs because she's so used to not knowing what a man's going to do, how they're going to respond or react. So consistency, steadiness first. And then the second thing would be being able to deepen to meet her at a more felt sense level. Because then she's like, if you speak to a woman that has a man that can meet her in the depth, she's like, I don't care what house we live in, what car we have, what color, like brand of clothes we wear. Like we've got love. That's what women want. Safety for men from women really looks like, and a key one is the acceptance, the encouragement even to deepen, to feel. It's like, hey, I want you to cry. I want you to be angry. I want you to feel your things. It's one of the most healing things that I experienced with my ex-partner was I had so much shame around my anger. I could be angry with the men, but if I was around my partner, I'd have to shut that down because I don't want to be an angry partner. I don't want to be intimidating or scary. One of the biggest things she said to me was like, feel your anger. Don't fucking hide it. Like let it out. I want to see you in it because then I know you can be with it and you're actually safe. That was huge for me. And I don't mean like punching walls and putting holes in things, but I mean like, like doing the pillow on the bed or hitting the bag or those things, yelling, letting myself feel it. That then created safety because she got to witness it knowing that I'm a safe man. So one of the big things that created more safety for me to be more of me with her. So women encouraging men to be with their deeper sense, that felt emotion, is huge. And then the other aspect of it in terms of creating or providing safety for men is appreciation. The primary thing that men want to do for their woman is provide, but a lot of men feel resistance to it because they don't feel appreciated. I learned this from John Gray and Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus years ago. Women want validation, men want appreciation. Women want their emotions and their feelings to be validated. I hear you, I understand, I get that. I really can understand what you're feeling right now. Men want to be appreciated. Thank you so much for taking the bins out. Thank you so much for always tidying up. Thank you for washing my car. But what happens is for a lot of women, it becomes expected, men's provision. It's like men should provide. That's kind of their role. And if, he's going out and working his job and she's looking after the kids, there still needs to be that thank you so much for working so hard to provide for our family. Because after a period of time, it can become expected. That provision is just expected. Then he doesn't feel appreciated. So he starts to resent her and or the work. I'm doing all of this, but I don't really what's the point? No one appreciates it. All this effort. So appreciation is massive for men.
You highlighted two things that I think are incredibly important. Number one is meeting in the depths and meeting a woman in the depths of her emotions, in the depths of her despair, in the depths of her depression, in the depths of her anxiety, in the depths of her stress, in the depths of her worry. But I think you and I would both be naive to think that only women live in the depths. I think you and I would both agree that men live in the depths as well. And one of the greatest things that's needed is for both men and women alike to feel the full range of feelings, feel the full range of emotions that they are experiencing, because you can't heal what you're unwilling to feel, and you can't grow if you're unwilling to show. If I want to heal, I have to feel everything: the anger, the rage, the hurt, the bitterness, the frustration, the despair. If a woman wants to heal, she has to feel everything. And at times that's messy, at times that's scary, and every time it's vulnerable, and every time it is going to actually be a time where we really need to show up for each other. But you mentioned something else, and you mentioned women want to be validated and men want to be appreciated. And I would also add on to that appreciated, I would also say respected. I think there's a direct connection between respect and validation. I think there's a direct connection between a woman feeling validated. And it's something that I try and do for my wife. I don't always do it the best. I don't always do the best at making sure she feels validated. And I would say with that comes the ability to feel seen and heard. Do you see me and do you hear me? And so, Todd, I have one more question for you as we bring this conversation to a close. And there's a lot of talk on relationships. You mentioned you, me, and we.
Mm,
There's a lot of talk about a person needs to be healed before they can enter into a relationship. If you're not fully healed, how can you engage in a relationship? Okay. I'm convinced that relationships can bring their own element of healing. Relationships can be used as mirrors where each partner reflects the other person back to themselves so that way they can heal. Healing doesn't take place in isolation always. Sometimes it takes place in community, which is something that you see in your retreats. So, the last question that I have for you in the realm of relationships, specifically dating, marriage, how do we help each other heal together? How do I help my wife heal? How does my wife help me heal? How do you help if you're with a partner? How do you help your partner heal? How does she help you heal? How do we help each other heal so that way we no longer have to continue rehearsing or experiencing the things that might have broken us, but are actually part of what I would call our redemption story so that we can become who we're called to be?
I answered this question last night on Instagram, I think, actually, almost identical to this question. I put in a step by step process because the question was related to relationship. And the one piece I'll add before I go into the step by step process is that we can work on ourselves as individuals, do so much personal development, mindset, psychology, psychotherapy, plant medicine, all of these different things. We can do so much prayer and meditation and breath work. And we work on ourselves so much and we deepen, we have so much self-awareness and so much of embodiment. And then we go into a relationship and it's like, where did all of this shit come from? All of the triggers, all of the challenges, all of that. And the main reason you alluded to it, I'll speak to it though briefly, is that our partner becomes the direct mirror of our primary caregivers. Our deepest wounds are with our primary caregivers because those are the people that we were most attached to and we sought the most love from. Then as we're older, our romantic partner becomes the person we're most attached to and we seek the most love from. So they become the immediate signal to our nervous system of all of those little red flags from childhood. And that's why relationship is the initiation. Relationship is the real grounds for healing. Not out of relationship. You can do some work relationally, but you'll be doing it on yourself. But as soon as you enter a relationship, those things are going to come up deeper, fuller, more intensely because you're not in a room or in a group where you can just sit and talk about it and not have that person interrupt or jump in or need to share their thing. And so the relationship is the healing grounds. It is the initiation. It is the rite of passage to becoming the integrated man. That's where the real work in relationship begins. It's in the relationship. So that's the first piece there. And then the way I explain it to people that are doing this work that are maybe in relationship and they're struggling with this, or they're not in relationship and they want to, but they're unsure. They're doing the whole like, I need to heal me before I enter, like you said, is number one, self-awareness. So it's awareness of what's the pattern that typically plays out in relationship, because without self-awareness, we try to get that awareness externally, which means we put pressure and expectation on our partner to know what's going on, which is unfair because that will then create resentment if they don't understand. So first is self-awareness. What's the pattern or the trigger? Second is then the self-processing. So that's like, okay, if there's charge there around this pattern, I need to work on that to allow that to lessen so that if that trigger arises, I don't react with a 10 out of 10 intensity. Maybe by processing some of that charge through connecting and holding and healing that boy, it's a 6 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10, which then that in itself, the self-responsibility, you've already helped the relationship because you know the pattern and you've already decreased the intensity of the trigger. So that's step one and step two. Then the next part of it, when we bring it into relationship, I say is relational awareness. So bringing this awareness to your partner, usually once some of the charge has been worked with. Because if you haven't already worked with some of the charge, you'll bring the charge to the conversation, and that's just an argument waiting to happen. So the awareness of, hey, this has been going on. I've realized this. I've sat with it. I've kind of been with it to get it now. And I want to bring it to you so that you have the awareness. So if it pops up, you know how to support me, or you know what I need. And you can also call me forward if you know that I have something I should be taking responsibility for, or I should be doing. So the relational awareness is then you become a team. And then the fourth step is where we then go into if there needs to be relational processing. To me, that's the most beautiful, the most heart opening, the most transcendental experience is the relational healing or the relational processing when you're in relationship and your partner knows that you have a real wound around a particular thing and they know it's popping up for you and they have the capacity to be with you, hear you as you feel your way through that, to remain present with you as you're deep in your emotion or deep in the experience. Because what that does is it brings your, most of the time, those deep, dark wounds, they're our deep, dark shadows. They're the things we don't want people to see. And the person that we're most attached to, we love the most, and we're most fearful of abandoning us, is seeing in our deepest, darkest shit. Like that's when the heart expands. That's when the heart opens. That's when the safety of the relationship doesn't come from up doing the work. It comes from the depths that you've met yourselves at. And you get to love them for holding you so deeply, and they get to love you for the depths they've been able to witness you in. It's like an honor. So those are the four steps that I recommend to people when it comes to relational healing.
This conversation has confirmed and reminded me of why I so value the work that you do and the work that Ryan does. Like I said, when I heard Ryan on the Sacred Thomas podcast, the stuff that he said, the material that he said, it challenged me and it forced me to do two words that I would say sometimes we use these words in a negative or a derogatory way. I know I've been guilty of using these words in a derogatory way, and I don't think they're meant to be insulting in nature. I think that they're, if used properly, they can actually be used as encouragement. And the two words are simply this: grow up, grow up. And I know for me, my current relationship, my current marriage is, to your point, an initiation, rite of passage. Looking back over my life, it is forcing me into the place where I am having to become the man that I never had in my life. I could no longer look to my father and say what he did or didn't give me. I can no longer shift blame. I can no longer try and make excuses for why I cannot and should not show up in the way that I need to. And for me, I think that's the ultimate expression of initiation. It's growing up.
Mm.
And so I think if there's anything that I could say to anyone who would watch this podcast once it's finally released, it's simply this: grow up is not necessarily meant to be a derogatory or insulting phrase. It's meant to encourage you to reach your highest potential and to become the man or the woman that you've always wanted to be. There is so much hope and potential on the other side of your yes. There's so much hope and potential on the other side of your being willing to take ownership and accountability and responsibility for your own healing and for your own growth and maturity. No one is going to come and do the work for you. No one is coming to save me. No one is coming to make me grow up. My wife isn't going to make me do it. My brother isn't going to make me do it. But I know that I need guys around me that can help me do it. And you and I had this conversation even in voice clips through text message where we just expressed the need for community. And that's one of the things that I am prioritizing in this season of my life, prioritizing surrounding myself with men. And as we heal well, we can fight harder. And as we heal well, we can fight stronger. And as we heal well, we can fight without wanting to give up, without wanting to throw in the towel, without wanting to run, without wanting to abandon, without wanting to walk out. We can stay in the fight, knowing that on the other side of the fight is something that I would say is probably glorious and marvelous and wonderful. because too many men are giving up. Too many men are walking away. Too many men are throwing in the towel. They're giving up on themselves first and foremost. And I'm convinced before a man gives up on anyone else, he first gives up on himself. And that's something that I don't want to do. I don't ever want to give up on myself. I don't ever want to stop caring about me. I don't ever want to stop loving me. I don't ever want to stop showing up for me, because when I do, the collateral damage around me is going to be the people that I care about the most. The collateral damage around me is going to be the people that depend on me and need me the most. And so I say all that to say this, Todd. I want to thank you, number one, for your time, for agreeing to speak with me. It is incredible. I feel like I'm speaking to you from the future. So I feel like there's some significance where you're already in Wednesday. I'm still living in Tuesday. So I feel like I'm speaking to the future version of me that I have yet to see. And so I want to thank you for your work and thank you for the work that Ryan does. And you guys have been powerful voices in my life over the past few weeks. And I consider it an honor and a privilege to have been able to sit down and talk with you.
Thank you, my man. There's one thing that I want to close out with, if that's all right.
Of course.
And it's beautiful that you brought up the growing up, because there's an analogy that I give now to people that are looking to surround themselves with community or other men that might be leading in this space. To me, there's height and there's depth. Height to me is success, it's achievement, it's maybe business success or wealth or performance as an athlete, going up, height of success. And then there's depth, the depth that you meet yourself, the journeys that you're willing to go on, the processes, the rituals, the ceremonies that you're willing to move through. There's men that you will meet that have height, that have massive business success and wealth. And then there are those men that you meet that have depth, and you feel like they are rooted into the earth with every word they say. There's something about their presence that feels steady, that feels stable, that feels unperturbable. And what I welcome men to look at is, where are they at in their height and where are they at in their depth? For me, in my circle, I choose to have men that are purely of depth. They're not doing a whole lot in business, but they are the guys that have sat in ceremony and in ritual for the last decade to know themselves, to be steady, to be able to hold whatever is brought forth to them. And then I have men that don't do that deeper work, but they have companies and billions of dollars, massive amounts of wealth that they've created through these companies and these partnerships that inspires me in a very different way. They have very different values. They have very different ways they show up in their lives. But what they do is they show me both sides of the coin of what we can be as a man. And so my journey is, for every step higher I go, how can I take another step deeper into myself, so that when I reach more people or support more people, connect with more men, that I have the depth to be able to hold what's there. And that's how you start to build out a community where it's not only going higher and potentially avoiding what's underneath through that, but we also get to meet ourselves and be fulfilled and aligned and purpose-filled on the journey. So not only height, but depth as well. Thank you, my man.
That's a good mic drop moment. It's not only about height, it's about depth. And for us to be fully integrated and fully whole, we need to be people of both height and people of depth, people that are achieving, but also people that are growing. I think that's really good. I think that's a good way to summarize and bring it to the conclusion, this conversation. And so for those of you who aren't already following Todd, I would encourage you. He is Todd Jarrett. I would encourage you to follow him on Instagram, follow his friend Ryan Moresby White. And I salute you guys. I commend you guys. I tip my hat to you guys for the work that you're doing. So again, Todd, thank you so much for joining me all the way from the land down under. I appreciate you and I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you, my man. Love it from the land down under. Appreciate you.